There's a quiet kind of power in certain stories. They don't shout. They don't shake the earth. They simply walk beside you slowly, gently, until you realize they've changed something inside you. The story of Enoch is one of those stories. He isn't like Noah, commanding the attention of a whole world. He isn't like Moses, parting seas and confronting kings. He isn't like David, fighting giants with a sling. Enoch is different. He doesn't perform miracles. He doesn't preach sermons. He doesn't leave behind laws or songs or prophecies. He simply walks with God. And somehow, that small detail becomes one of the most mysterious and powerful lines in the entire Bible. Today, I want to take you into that journey, not as a distant history lesson, but as a gentle walk into a life that whispers something deep to your soul. A story that reminds you that intimacy with God is not about being loud, being perfect, or being known. It's about being close. So let's begin slowly, like a walk at dusk. Part 1. A world losing its way. When Enoch was born, the world was already slipping downhill. Humanity had started drifting, not suddenly, not violently, but quietly. The way people drift from prayer. The way a heart drifts from truth. The way a family drifts from God without ever planning to. The world felt heavy with self-centeredness. People lived long lives, but not deep ones. They built cities, but lost connection. They grew in number, but shrank in spirit. But in the middle of this world, a world already leaning toward darkness, a child was born. His parents named him Enoch. Nothing extraordinary was recorded about his early years. He wasn't labeled as gifted, strong, or prophetic. He was just a man in a generation turning away from God. But sometimes the people God uses most are not the ones who look the loudest, the strongest, or the brightest. They are the ones who become quiet enough to hear him. And Enoch, he learned how to be quiet. Part 2. The moment something shifted. The Bible tells us something fascinating. Enoch walked with God after he became the father of Methuselah. It's almost as if something awakened in him after holding his first child. You know how life suddenly becomes real when you look into the eyes of someone who depends on you? How your priorities shift. How you start seeing beyond today. That's what happened to Enoch. Maybe he held little Methuselah in his arms and thought, what kind of world will my son grow up in? Who will guide him when I'm gone? What legacy am I building? Sometimes the greatest spiritual awakenings begin in the ordinary moments, a birth, a loss, a quiet fear, or a sudden realization that life is too fragile to live casually. For Enoch, that moment became a turning point. He didn't just believe in God. He began to walk with him, step by step, day by day, conversation by conversation. Part 3. What does it mean to walk with God? When the Bible says walk, it doesn't mean physical walking. It means living in step with God, letting your will align with His, bringing Him into your ordinary days, listening more than speaking, trusting more than understanding. Walking with God is not dramatic. It's not loud. It's not showy. It is simple trust lived consistently. Imagine Enoch waking up before dawn, hearing the stillness of the morning and whispering, Lord, be with me today. Imagine him working in the fields and talking to God in his heart. Imagine him looking at the stars at night and knowing that the one who created them was walking beside him. His faith wasn't built on grand gestures. It was built on daily closeness. And maybe that's the part we forget sometimes. We think God is impressed by impressive things, but He is drawn to hearts that draw near. Part 4. A different kind of life. As years passed, people noticed Enoch wasn't like everyone else. Not because he was perfect. Not because he was holier than thou. Not because he isolated himself. It was something gentler. There was peace around him, the kind that calms a room. There was wisdom in him, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself. There was a softness in the way he spoke, as if he knew something others had forgotten. And there was a purity in the way he lived, without trying to impress anyone. You know that feeling when you meet someone who has been through storms, but there is still light in their eyes? Someone who looks as if they carry God's presence in their very breath? That was Enoch. He moved through life with the quiet confidence of someone who wasn't walking alone. Part 5. Enoch's message to a fading world. Even though Enoch wasn't loud, he wasn't silent either. The Bible says he spoke truth, not with anger or condemnation, but with a heart that wanted people to come back to God. He reminded people that God still sees, that God still cares, that judgment would one day come, not because God is cruel, but because God is just. But here's the thing. People didn't listen. The world didn't care. People were too busy, too distracted, too absorbed in themselves. And Enoch, he kept walking with God anyway. That quiet consistency became his greatest message. Sometimes your walk speaks louder than your words. Part 6, 300 Years of Closeness. The Bible says Enoch walked with God for 300 years. Think about that. Not 3 months, not 3 years, 3 centuries. That's longer than entire civilizations last. Imagine the depth of that relationship. Imagine the conversations he had with God. Imagine the trust that grew slowly, quietly, naturally, like roots growing deep into the earth. And something beautiful happened. The more Enoch walked with God, the more the world didn't feel like home. He started seeing life differently. He felt time differently. He carried heaven inside him while walking on earth. His steps were human, but his heart walked in eternity. Part 7. The day Enoch didn't come home. One day, a day like any other, Enoch walked away from his home. Maybe he told his family, "I'll be back soon." Maybe he stepped outside to pray. Maybe he wandered into the fields, talking with God like he always did. But this time, he didn't return. The Bible says it in the most stunning, simple sentence. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. No death, no funeral, no grave, no goodbyes. One moment he was on earth, the next moment he stepped into eternity. It's as if God whispered, "Enoch, you've walked so close to me for so long. Why don't you just come home with me today?" And Enoch went. What a way to leave this world. Not through pain, not through fear, but through closeness. Not running from death, but walking into God's arms. Part 8. Why God took him. People often ask, why Enoch? What made his walk so special? Why did God take him? The Bible gives a clue in Hebrews. He pleased God. Not with miracles, not with fame, not with achievements, not with strength. He pleased God with faith. Real, simple, daily faith. The kind that stays. The kind that trusts in silence. The kind that keeps walking even when no one else is. Faith is not feeling spiritual. It's not knowing everything. It's choosing God again and again. Enoch lived that choice so consistently that heaven became more real to him than earth. Part 9. What Enoch's life teaches us. Enoch's story is short, but his message is deep. And if you listen closely, it feels like he's whispering 4 things to you. 1. You don't need a perfect life to walk with God. You just need a willing heart. 2. Your walk matters more than your words. People sense God in your peace, your patience, your kindness. 3. Your environment doesn't decide your closeness with God. Enoch lived in a corrupt world, yet walked faithfully. 4. God notices quiet faith. The world may overlook you. People may ignore you, but God sees every step toward him. Part 10. Walking with God today. So, what does Enoch's story mean for you? Right now, in your life, in your struggles? It means God is not asking you to be extraordinary. He's asking you to be close. You can walk with God. When you whisper a prayer while making breakfast. When tears fall quietly at night. When you choose kindness even when you're tired. When you forgive even though it hurts. When you trust him in uncertainty. When you breathe his name in the middle of anxiety. Walking with God is less about perfection, more about connection. And every step you take toward him, even the small, halting, imperfect steps, he sees them all. Part 11. Your journey starts where you are. Maybe you feel far from God. Maybe you feel tired. Maybe you feel like you've failed too much. Maybe you think God only walks with the strong, the pure, the holy. But Enoch's life whispers a different truth. God walks with the willing. Start today. Even if it's a small prayer. Even if it's 1 minute of silence. Even if it's just saying, God, I want to walk with you. He meets you where you are, and he walks with you the rest of the way. Part 12. The Legacy of a Quiet Man. Enoch never built an ark, never led a nation, never fought a giant, never performed a miracle, never wrote a book, but he did something far more beautiful. He made God his daily companion. And because of that simple faith, his name still shines thousands of years later. In a noisy world, God honored the man who walked quietly. And maybe, just maybe, that's the invitation for us too. Not to be loud, not to be powerful, not to be impressive, but to walk, step by step, heart to heart, with the one who created us. Some lives feel like gentle lanterns in a dark valley. They don't shine with the brightness of fame or miracles, but with a warm, steady light that helps others remember where home is. Enoch lived that kind of life. His impact didn't come from power or leadership. It came from quiet closeness with God, the kind of closeness that grows not through dramatic moments, but through everyday steps of faith. Imagine a world where people live long but drift far. A world filled with noise and ambition, but lacking direction. That world was Enoch's home. People around him were busy chasing their own desires, building their own legacies, and creating their own gods. Life looked full, yet it was hollow. But in the middle of that growing emptiness, Enoch carried something rare, the sense that life meant nothing without God. He didn't start out as a prophet or a spiritual giant. He started out as an ordinary man trying to understand his place in the world. But something in him kept stirring, whispering that there was more to life than what everyone else was living for. That whisper would become the guiding melody of his entire journey. The turning point of Enoch's life happened when he became a father. Holding a newborn often shakes a person awake. That tiny heartbeat, that fragile life depending on you for everything, it changes the way you see your own life. When Enoch held his son Methuselah, something opened inside him. Suddenly, the world felt heavier. Choices felt deeper. Legacy mattered. He saw that one day his son would grow up in the same world, the same drifting, spiritually sleeping world, and he realized he needed God more than ever. So Enoch did something simple, something powerful. He started walking with God. This wasn't a dramatic event. It didn't begin with thunder or visions. It began with a quiet decision. A decision to talk to God in the morning, to think about him during the day, to ask him questions when he was confused, to seek his peace when he was troubled, to slow down enough to hear his whisper. Walking with God for Enoch wasn't a ritual. It wasn't a religious duty. It was a relationship, honest, personal, gentle. He learned how to listen. He learned how to trust. He learned how to carry God into his ordinary moments. When he worked in the fields, he talked to God. When he watched the stars at night, he felt God's presence. When he walked through his village, he sensed God guiding every step. His life didn't suddenly become perfect. He faced the same challenges everyone faced: fear, uncertainty, questions without answers. But the difference was this: he didn't face them alone. Over time, the closeness became visible. Even though Enoch never tried to look spiritual, people noticed something different about him. They saw peace in his eyes, a peace untouched by the chaos around him. They heard calmness in his voice, a calmness that came from trust, not personality. They felt a strange warmth in his presence, the kind that makes you wonder what he knows that you don't. Enoch wasn't loud about his faith. He didn't force his beliefs on anyone. But when he spoke, people listened, not because he was powerful, but because he was sincere. His words carried weight, not from authority, but from authenticity. When he talked about God, it wasn't philosophy, it was experience. He spoke as someone who actually knew God, not just believed in him. He warned his generation gently, but firmly, that the path they were walking would lead to destruction. He urged them to return to the God who created them. He tried to remind them that the world they were clinging to was temporary, but the one who made it was eternal. Still, most people didn't listen. They were too consumed with themselves, too distracted with the noise of life, too comfortable in their distance from God. Enoch could have felt discouraged. He could have stopped trying. He could have blended in. But he didn't. He kept walking with God, faithfully, quietly, consistently. 300 years passed like this. 300 years of daily closeness. 300 years of choosing God again and again. 300 years of simple faithfulness. Imagine that depth of intimacy. Imagine a relationship so strong, so steady, that the world loses its grip on you. Enoch lived on earth, but his heart lived in heaven. The longer he walked with God, the more he felt like a traveler just passing through. The world no longer defined him. People's opinions no longer shaped him. Even time no longer frightened him. His life was anchored in someone eternal. Then came the day that would change history. The day Enoch didn't come home. Maybe he stepped out of his house early in the morning, like he always did. Maybe he whispered a prayer as the sunlight touched the earth. Maybe he walked toward the fields, feeling God's presence beside him. Maybe he talked quietly with God, the way two close friends would talk on a long walk. At some point during that walk, something sacred happened, something no human had ever experienced before. Heaven opened, not with thunder, not with lightning, not with fear, just with a quiet invitation. It's as if God whispered, "You've walked so close to me for so long, why stop now? Come home with me." And Enoch did. No pain, no sickness, no fading, no last breath. He simply stepped from earth into eternity. One heartbeat here, the next heartbeat in the arms of God. People searched for him, but he wasn't there. They called his name, but no answer came. Days passed, and the truth settled in like a peaceful miracle. God had taken him. Why? Because Enoch pleased him. Not by grand deeds, not by dramatic faith, not by spiritual fireworks, but by simple, steady, daily closeness. The kind of faith that doesn't need attention. The kind of faith that grows in silent moments. The kind of faith that keeps walking even when no one else is walking with you. Enoch's life teaches something beautiful. You don't need to be extraordinary for God to draw near. You just need to be open. God is not looking for perfect people. He is looking for willing hearts, hearts that choose him even when the world ignores him. Maybe you've felt distant from God. Maybe the world around you feels too loud, too cold, too overwhelming. Maybe you think you aren't spiritual enough or strong enough or pure enough to walk with God. But Enoch's story whispers a different truth. God walks with anyone who wants him. He meets you in your quiet moments. He speaks in your stillness. He lifts you when you feel weak. He stays even when you feel lost. Walking with God starts small. A prayer, a breath, a moment of honesty, a decision to open your heart. And as you keep taking steps, little steps, imperfect steps, God draws closer and closer until his presence becomes part of your rhythm. Enoch's life reminds us that the most powerful legacy isn't built with achievements or applause. It's built with faith. Not louder faith, but deeper faith. Not public faith, but private faith. Faith lived consistently. Faith lived quietly. Faith lived daily. And when your last day on earth comes, you won't be running to a stranger. You'll be walking into the arms of someone you've known all your life. Enoch lived that truth. And through his quiet life, he still whispers across history. Walk with God one step at a time. He is closer than you think. Some stories feel like soft rain. They fall quietly, but they settle deep. Enoch's life is one of those stories, the kind that doesn't overwhelm you with drama, but slowly fills your heart with a strange, peaceful longing for God. When you think about him, you don't think about miracles or battles or grand missions. You think about closeness. About a man who made God his daily companion in a world that had forgotten him. Enoch lived in a time when people were drifting fast. They lived long lives, but they didn't live with purpose. They had everything the earth could give, but lacked what heaven offered. Their hearts were busy with survival, but empty of meaning. They built houses, but lost homes. They created tools, but lost wisdom. They grew stronger, but became spiritually numb. But in the middle of that noise and emptiness, one man's heart remained awake. One man felt something missing in the world around him. One man sensed that life wasn't meant to be a long routine of eating, working, and surviving. Something inside Enoch kept whispering that human life had a deeper center, and that center was God himself. Enoch didn't discover this truth in a single moment. It happened slowly, like the sunrise creeping over a mountain. Maybe he felt it in the early mornings when the world was quiet and the sky felt heavy with an unseen presence. Maybe he felt it when he watched people push God away for the sake of pleasure or pride. Maybe he felt it in the heaviness inside his own heart, the kind a person feels when they know they're missing something sacred. But everything shifted when he became a father. Holding his newborn son Methuselah changed him from the inside out. When you hold a child, something softens in you. You see innocence. You see dependence. You see the fragile miracle of life. And for Enoch, it awakened a hunger for God, a deep need to walk with the one who holds every breath. So he began a simple habit that would shape his entire destiny. He started walking with God. He didn't start with long prayers or complicated rituals. He started with openness, with little conversations, with moments of honesty, with pauses during his day to feel the presence of the one who created him. Bit by bit, that closeness grew. What began as occasional moments became a daily rhythm, and what began as a rhythm became a lifestyle. Enoch walked with God the way a friend walks with a friend, not perfectly, but sincerely. He talked to God about his fears, his hopes, his questions, even his confusion about the world around him. And slowly, Enoch realized something beautiful. God was listening. God wasn't distant. God wasn't silent. God wasn't hidden. He was close, gentle, attentive, present. This closeness changed everything in Enoch. It softened him. It strengthened him. It shaped his words and decisions. People began to notice something different about him. He didn't look like the world. He didn't speak like the world. There was a glow in his spirit, quiet, steady, peaceful, the kind that can't be faked. Some people were drawn to him. They felt calm around him. They felt safe sharing their worries. They felt inspired to rethink their lives when he spoke. Others avoided him, unsettled by the purity in him that confronted their own emptiness. But Enoch didn't seek approval. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was simply walking with God, and the presence of God in him naturally touched others. Enoch wasn't a harsh man. His warnings to people weren't filled with anger. They were filled with compassion. He urged people to return to God not because he wanted to judge them, but because he had tasted a closeness with God that he wished everyone could know. He saw danger in the path they were choosing, and love pushed him to speak. Still, most people didn't listen. They laughed. They shrugged. They continued chasing distractions, thinking life was theirs to control forever. Enoch didn't force anything. He simply kept being faithful, kept being gentle, kept being honest, kept walking with God even when no one else cared. And that's what made him extraordinary. Over the decades, Enoch's closeness with God deepened. It wasn't built on miracles. It was built on consistency, on trust, on returning to God every day. While others were building cities, Enoch was building a relationship. While others were feeding their pride, Enoch was feeding his soul. While others were drowning in chaos, Enoch was resting in God's presence. And God noticed. God always notices the quiet ones, the ones who seek him not for rewards but for relationship, the ones who pray not to impress, but to connect, the ones whose faith is not loud but loyal, the ones who don't pretend to be perfect, but who keep showing up anyway. 300 years passed like this. 300 years of choosing God. 300 years of inner transformation. 300 years of heaven pressing gently into a human heart. Imagine a man walking through fields with God, as if they were walking side by side. Imagine him looking at the stars and hearing God's whisper in the night breeze. Imagine him facing storms and feeling God's comfort calm his heart. Imagine the deep intimacy that must have grown through centuries of faith. It's no wonder the world began to feel less like home to him. The longer he walked with God, the more he felt like the earth was just a temporary doorway. His heart was anchored somewhere higher, somewhere brighter, somewhere eternal. Then, one quiet day, everything changed. Maybe Enoch woke up early, stepping outside while the sky was still pale. Maybe he breathed in the cool morning air and whispered a familiar prayer. Maybe he walked toward the hills, feeling that same presence beside him, the presence that had become more real to him than the ground beneath his feet. As he walked, the veil between heaven and earth grew thin. Heaven had been watching this man, this loyal, tender, faithful man for centuries. And God, who loved him deeply, chose to do something no one had ever seen before. Enoch's steps on earth simply stopped, and his steps in eternity began. He didn't collapse. He didn't grow weak. He didn't breathe a final breath. He didn't feel pain. He was walking, and then he was home. One heartbeat on earth, the next heartbeat in heaven. People searched for him. They called his name. They waited for him to come back. Days passed. Confusion turned to awe. A quiet miracle was unfolding. Enoch wasn't missing. He had been taken. God took him not because he was powerful, but because he was close. Not because he achieved greatness, but because he chose faithfulness. Not because he forced a legacy, but because he lived a relationship. Enoch pleased God. That's the simple truth behind his extraordinary ending. He pleased God with a life that said, "I choose you every day." He pleased God with quiet obedience. He pleased God with trust. He pleased God with a pure heart in a corrupt world. And through his story, he still whispers to us today. He whispers that walking with God is not about perfection. It's about intention. It's about making space for him in our mornings, in our worries, in our decisions, in our quiet hours. It's about letting him into the places we hide, the places we fear, the places we don't understand. Enoch's life reminds us that faith grows in small steps. You don't have to feel holy. You don't have to be strong every day. You don't need dramatic moments. You just need to begin, just one sincere moment at a time. God meets the willing. He strengthens the tired. He draws near to those who draw near to him. And as you keep walking, something beautiful happens. His presence shapes your thoughts. His peace softens your fears. His voice steadies your decisions. His love fills the empty corners of your heart. Enoch's story shows that the greatest miracles happen inside a person, not around them. And the deepest closeness with God isn't loud. It's lived quietly, faithfully, daily. One day, your walk will end too. But if you've walked with God, the end won't feel like an ending. It will feel like coming home to someone who walked every step beside you. Enoch lived that truth. And through his life, he still calls to every heart. Walk with God. Walk simply. Walk honestly. Walk daily. Heaven is closer than you think. There are lives that leave footprints on the world, and then there are lives that leave footprints on eternity. Enoch's life belongs to the latter. He didn't fight battles, build kingdoms, or perform miracles that everyone could see. Yet, his story carries a quiet power, a steady whisper that has reached thousands of years into the future. He walked in a world that had almost forgotten God, yet he carried heaven in his heart. And that is a story worth slowing down for. Enoch was born into an age of long lives and wandering hearts. People were busy living, but not truly awake. They were building cities, multiplying families, inventing tools, accumulating wealth, all the while drifting further from the Creator who had given them life. The world was full of motion but empty of meaning, full of noise but devoid of truth. And yet, amidst all of this, Enoch felt a pull, a quiet awareness that life was more than what the eye could see. Something inside him longed for connection with God, a connection he would pursue all his days. He didn't become a spiritual giant overnight. He was a man of ordinary beginnings, but he had a tender heart that noticed what others ignored. He watched the world around him and saw the emptiness behind laughter, the hollowness behind celebrations, the fragility behind pride. And rather than giving into despair or cynicism, he chose another path. He chose to walk with God. The beginning of this walk, like most great journeys, was small and gentle. He did not start with great speeches or public acts of devotion. He began by noticing God in the quiet moments, the morning dew on the grass, the stars shining at night, the rhythm of his own breathing. He spoke to God as one would speak to a friend, honestly and intimately, sharing his fears, his questions, and his hopes. Day by day, these small steps grew into a steady rhythm of closeness. Becoming a father was a pivotal moment for Enoch. Holding his newborn son Methuselah stirred something deep within him. There is something transformative about holding a life that depends entirely on you, about seeing innocence that needs protection, guidance, and love. It awakens a sense of responsibility, of urgency, and of hope. For Enoch, it was a divine nudge to take his own spiritual life seriously, to walk closely with the God who held the universe and his tiny child alike. That intimacy became the backbone of his faith. As Enoch walked with God, the world began to notice a difference in him, not because he sought attention, but because genuine faith cannot remain hidden. There was a calm in his presence, a stillness in his voice, and a warmth in his actions that drew others near and unsettled some. He did not preach loudly, nor did he force his beliefs on anyone. Instead, his life became a testament, a living example of what it means to walk with God. People felt it in him, a quiet assurance that someone had touched the eternal. Yet his environment remained challenging. The world continued its descent into corruption. Most people ignored his warnings and advice. Some mocked him. Some rejected the message altogether. And yet, Enoch did not falter. He continued faithfully. Every day was an act of quiet obedience, a deliberate choice to seek God above all else. That consistency was a kind of miracle, a beacon in a world lost in shadows. Over time, Enoch's walk with God became legendary, though not in the way we usually imagine. It was not fame or wealth or power that marked his life, but depth, sincerity, and an unwavering relationship with the Creator. For 300 years, he walked faithfully, speaking with God, listening for his guidance, and living in alignment with his will. The ordinary became extraordinary because it was filled with divine presence. Each moment, each breath, each step became a meditation, a prayer, a connection. Imagine the intimacy Enoch must have experienced. Each morning, waking with God beside him. Each day, working in the fields, talking to God about his worries and joys. Each night, lying under the stars, sensing the vastness of heaven and the nearness of the one who created it all. For centuries, this rhythm never faltered. Enoch's heart beat in step with eternity. Then came the moment that would forever mark his life as unique. One ordinary day, Enoch took a walk as he had done countless times before. Perhaps he stepped outside into the soft morning light, or perhaps he wandered among the trees, breathing the air and feeling God's presence as if it were the very wind. And in that quiet moment, heaven opened. The invisible boundary between earth and eternity faded. God reached for him, not in fear or judgment, but in love. And Enoch simply stepped forward. The Bible tells it in one short, extraordinary line. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. No death, no struggle, no pain, no sorrow, just a seamless transition from the temporal to the eternal. One heartbeat on earth, the next in God's presence. It is a vision so gentle, so peaceful, and yet so profound that it challenges everything we think we know about life and death. Enoch did not fade away. He was welcomed into eternity while still alive, a testament to the power of faith, intimacy, and obedience. Why was Enoch taken in this way? The answer lies in a single truth. He pleased God. Not by showing off his talents, not by commanding armies, not by performing miracles, but by walking faithfully, daily, honestly with his Creator. His life was a living prayer, a testament to trust, a reflection of consistent devotion. God honored him for his willingness to draw near, for his persistence in closeness, for his courage to remain faithful in a world that had forgotten him. The story of Enoch challenges us in ways that are still relevant today. It reminds us that extraordinary lives are not always the loudest or most visible. Sometimes, the most significant impact comes from quiet, faithful, and persistent choices. It reminds us that walking with God is not about perfection, but about intention. It reminds us that eternity is not found in grand gestures, but in the simple, consistent presence of God in our daily lives. Enoch's legacy whispers across time, we do not have to achieve greatness to be known by God. We do not have to be noticed by the world to be significant in heaven. Our lives are measured not by fame or wealth or influence, but by faithfulness, love, and intimacy with our Creator. And this intimacy is available to anyone at any time in the ordinary rhythms of life. Walking with God begins with a single step, a small choice to pause, to pray, to listen, to seek guidance. It grows through repetition, through patience, through honesty, through perseverance. And over time, it transforms the ordinary into the sacred, the temporary into the eternal, the fleeting into the timeless. Enoch's story also reminds us of the fragility and preciousness of life. The world around us may be loud and chaotic, but there is space for quiet devotion. There is room for integrity. There is room for love. There is room for intimacy with God. And even if no one else sees it, God does. He notices every sincere step, every whispered prayer, every humble choice to walk in faith. As we reflect on Enoch, we see that life is not measured by what we accumulate, by what we achieve, or by how we are remembered on earth. Life is measured by how closely we walk with God, by how faithfully we choose Him, by how consistently we allow His presence to guide our steps. Enoch lived this truth, and his example calls us to do the same. Perhaps today, you feel lost, weary, or unnoticed. Perhaps the world around you feels too loud, too harsh, or too shallow. But Enoch's life whispers a promise. God walks with you, not only in grand moments, but in the quiet, ordinary rhythms of your day. He meets you in the spaces between your responsibilities, in the moments of reflection, in the silence of your heart. And when you choose to walk with Him, even a single step at a time, you begin a journey that stretches beyond this world, into eternity. Enoch walked faithfully, quietly, intimately, for 300 years. He faced no applause, no recognition, no immediate reward. And yet, in the end, he was taken into God's presence, not because of human achievement, but because of steadfast devotion. His life remains a testament to the power of a heart fully committed, a spirit fully surrendered, and a relationship fully nurtured with the Creator. And so, Enoch continues to speak to us across the centuries. His story is not just history. It is an invitation to slow down, to listen, to trust, to walk faithfully, to open our hearts to God, and to embrace a life of intimacy with Him. It reminds us that heaven is closer than we think, that God is patient, that faith is powerful, and that the quietest footsteps often leave the deepest marks. The life of Enoch calls each of us to consider. Are we walking with God in our ordinary moments? Are we choosing faith daily, even when the world seems to ignore it? Are we letting His presence shape our thoughts, guide our actions, and comfort our hearts? These are the true measures of a life that pleases God, a life that, like Enoch's, may one day step seamlessly into eternity. There are lives that seem ordinary on the surface, but extraordinary in essence. Enoch's life is one of them. You might read his story and think, he did nothing remarkable, but that's exactly where its power lies. Enoch's greatness was not in what the world sees, but in what God knows. It was in the quiet faith, the consistent devotion, and the intimate walk with the Creator that defined him. And that quiet devotion transformed his life into a story that still whispers across centuries. Enoch lived in a world that was drifting. People were busy with their own pleasures, ambitions, and accomplishments. They grew in wealth and number, but shrank in spirit. They filled cities, but emptied their hearts. The divine presence was ignored by many, yet Enoch felt it. Even as society continued its downward path, he remained awake, aware that life's true meaning wasn't found in what people could see or touch, but in walking with God. He didn't start out special. There was nothing to suggest that he would become a man who would walk so closely with the Creator. But Enoch had something rare, an openness of heart. He was sensitive to the presence of God, to the stillness of truth, to the silent nudges of the Spirit. And as he grew, this awareness shaped every step he took. Fatherhood deepened his perspective. Holding his son Methuselah in his arms reminded him of life's fragility and God's supremacy. That small life, full of hope and innocence, awakened a spiritual responsibility in him. He realized that he needed God not just for himself, but for the generations that would follow. This realization nudged him further into intimacy with the Lord, and so his walk began. Simple, consistent, faithful. Walking with God for Enoch wasn't about rituals or grand gestures. It wasn't about impressing others or achieving recognition. It was about daily connection, a willingness to align his heart with God's. He prayed in quiet moments, whispered praises in routine tasks, and listened carefully for guidance in times of uncertainty. Each day was a choice, and each choice strengthened his relationship with God. The impact of Enoch's walk began to show, not through spectacle, but through presence. People noticed a peace in him that didn't come from circumstance, a calm that defied chaos. Even those who rejected God or ignored spiritual truth felt something different when they were near him. Enoch's life became a testimony, not through words, but through the quiet demonstration of faithful living. Yet his world remained a challenging place. Most ignored the message he carried. Many were too engrossed in their ambitions or distractions to notice the divine truth that Enoch embodied. Still, he did not falter. He continued to walk faithfully, daily choosing closeness with God. This steadfastness, repeated for centuries, was itself a miracle, a life sustained by trust and intimacy rather than force or recognition. For 300 years, Enoch lived this rhythm. 3 centuries of walking with God, step by step, prayer by prayer, moment by moment. Imagine the depth of that relationship. Imagine the conversations, the silent reflections, the moments of awe and gratitude. Imagine a life so anchored in eternity that the passing of time no longer felt burdensome, but gentle, flowing, and purposeful. Then one day, that steady walk culminated in the extraordinary. Enoch's final walk was ordinary in appearance, but extraordinary in destiny. He stepped into the open fields, perhaps feeling the morning sun warming his face, the wind brushing gently across the land. As always, he spoke with God, sharing thoughts, questions, and reflections. And in a moment beyond human comprehension, God took him. The Bible records this simply. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. No death, no struggle, no decay, one heartbeat on earth, the next in God's presence. Enoch's life ended not in the typical human way, but in the embrace of eternity. It was not the end, but a transition, a seamless continuation of the walk he had maintained faithfully all his days. Why was Enoch taken in this extraordinary way? Because he pleased God. Not by great works or heroic feats, not by recognition or spectacle, but by faithful consistency, sincere devotion, and a life fully oriented toward God. Enoch's story reminds us that God notices the hearts that choose him again and again, even when no one else does. The quiet faith that persists, the humble obedience that continues, the daily trust that never wavers. These are the lives God honors. Enoch's life also teaches that intimacy with God doesn't require grandeur. It requires presence. It requires honesty. It requires the willingness to show up, day after day, step after step, heart after heart. It doesn't demand perfection. It demands faithfulness. And the reward of such faithfulness is beyond comprehension, eternal life in God's presence, peace that transcends human understanding, and a legacy that echoes through history. For those of us reading his story today, there is a profound invitation. Enoch's walk is not reserved for a few chosen individuals. It is a call to each of us to cultivate closeness with God in our ordinary lives. We can do this in small moments, a prayer in the quiet morning, a pause to reflect during our work, a word of gratitude whispered in the night. Each step, each moment of intentionality becomes part of a larger rhythm of walking with God. Even when life feels chaotic, even when the world seems to ignore the truth, we can follow Enoch's example. Faithfulness is not measured by dramatic gestures or public recognition. It is measured by sincerity, perseverance, and consistency. Every act of obedience, every step toward God, every whispered prayer matters. And through it, God draws near to us, shaping us into vessels of His presence and preparing us for the eternal embrace that awaits. Enoch's story also reassures us that we are not alone in our journey. Walking with God means that even in loneliness, in struggle, in the moments when the world seems to have turned its back, God is there. He walks beside us, guiding, comforting, and sustaining. And like Enoch, the closer we walk with Him, the more our hearts align with eternity rather than the fleeting distractions of this world. In reflecting on Enoch, we see a life that pleases God, not through spectacle, but through intimacy. We see that our daily choices, small, often unseen, matter deeply. We see that God values consistency, sincerity, and love above all. And we see a path that leads from ordinary life to extraordinary closeness with the Creator. Enoch's journey challenges us to examine our own lives. Are we walking with God in our everyday moments? Are we choosing faithfulness over convenience, presence over distraction, trust over fear? Are we nurturing our hearts in a way that allows God to be present, shaping our thoughts, guiding our steps, and comforting our souls? Walking with God is not a one-time event. It is a lifelong journey, a series of choices, repeated daily, that accumulate into a life of faithfulness. And like Enoch, the reward of such a life is not only in eternity, but in the transformation it brings here and now. Peace, purpose, clarity, and a steady rhythm that anchors the soul in divine presence. Enoch's life continues to whisper across the ages. God notices faithfulness. God honors sincerity. God values intimacy. And God invites every one of us to begin our walk today. Step by step, moment by moment, heart by heart. It is never too late, and no effort is too small. God meets us wherever we are and walks with us wherever we go. The story of Enoch reminds us that greatness is not always loud or visible. True greatness is faithfulness. True strength is intimacy. True courage is consistency. True legacy is a heart fully surrendered to God. And for Enoch, that quiet, faithful life led him from the ordinary into eternity, leaving a timeless lesson for all who read about him today. Let us take this to heart. Let us walk with God. Let us cultivate closeness, trust, and faithfulness in our own lives. Let us live with the awareness that our steps, however small, are noticed, cherished, and drawn into the rhythm of eternity. And one day, like Enoch, we may find ourselves embraced by God Himself, not as an end, but as the continuation of a walk that began with faith and a willing heart. There are lives that seem ordinary on the surface, but extraordinary in essence. Enoch's life is one of them. To the casual observer, he may have seemed like any other man, living in a world consumed by noise, ambition, and distraction. Yet, beneath the surface, he walked a path few could understand, a path of intimacy with God, a life so aligned with the Creator that eternity itself reached down to him. His story is not about spectacle or power. It is about quiet devotion, steady faith, and the transformative power of walking closely with God. Enoch lived in a world where most people ignored the divine. People built cities, multiplied families, gathered wealth, and sought pleasures, yet they drifted farther from God. Life looked abundant on the outside, but inside, hearts were empty, spiritless, and restless. And in this environment, Enoch stood apart, not by force or show, but by a subtle awareness of something greater. He recognized that life without God was incomplete, no matter how full it seemed. That awareness became the foundation of his extraordinary walk. His journey began in small, quiet ways. Enoch did not start with grand prayers or public acts. He began by noticing God in the simple moments of life, the early morning sunlight, the rhythm of his work, the calm of night under the stars. He spoke to God in the way a child speaks to a parent, honestly and without pretense, sharing fears, questions, and hopes. Day by day, moment by moment, this relationship deepened, forming a steady rhythm that would last his entire life. Fatherhood added a new dimension to his closeness with God. Holding his son Methuselah in his arms, Enoch felt a profound sense of responsibility and urgency. Life had become more than personal survival. It had become stewardship of a fragile, innocent life. That awareness stirred a longing to know God more deeply and to walk faithfully for the sake of his son and future generations. His walk with God was no longer just a private pursuit. It was an inheritance he wished to pass on, a model of faithfulness to those who would come after him. Enoch's faithfulness was visible, even without words. People noticed something different about him. There was a serenity in his presence, a calmness that could not be explained by circumstances. His actions carried a weight that came from integrity, and his quiet devotion drew others near. Some were inspired by his life. Others were unsettled, confronted by a standard they could not yet reach. Yet Enoch did not seek recognition or approval. His motivation was not human praise, but divine connection. His life was a living testament to the power of quiet, consistent faith. The world around Enoch continued its decline. Many ignored the call to return to God. Some mocked him, some avoided him, and many continued in distraction and sin. And still, Enoch walked faithfully. He did not falter when others rejected the message. He did not grow bitter when ignored or ridiculed. His footsteps remained steady, a quiet rhythm of devotion and trust. In his consistency, he showed the extraordinary nature of ordinary obedience, the miracle of daily faithfulness in a world that had forgotten the divine. For centuries, Enoch's life followed this pattern. He prayed, he reflected, he listened. He observed the world's chaos, but did not allow it to penetrate the peace that God cultivated in him. He worked, he walked, he cared, and he loved, all while nurturing a deep and abiding connection with the Creator. Each small act of obedience, each whispered prayer, each thoughtful step became part of a life wholly oriented toward God. This consistency, repeated for hundreds of years, shaped a character that was both humble and radiant. Enoch's walk was not free from struggle. There were moments of doubt, questions about life, uncertainties about the world. Yet, even in these moments, he returned to God, seeking guidance and strength. The human heart, even the faithful one, faces fear and confusion. But the difference lies in what you do with that fear, whether you turn away or whether you lean closer. Enoch chose to lean closer, and that choice defined his life. 300 years passed in this rhythm of faithfulness. 3 centuries of walking closely with God. 3 centuries of ordinary life made extraordinary by divine presence. Imagine the depth of intimacy, the countless conversations, the quiet gratitude, the moments of reflection, the steady rhythm of a heart aligned with eternity. This is the kind of life that changes the soul, even if it passes unnoticed by the world. Then came the day that would mark Enoch's life forever. He walked as he always did, perhaps through the fields, under the morning sun, or along a quiet path, breathing the air and speaking to God as he had for centuries. And in a moment beyond human comprehension, heaven opened. The veil between earth and eternity faded, and God reached for him. Enoch did not struggle or resist. He simply walked into the embrace of eternity, the culmination of a life faithfully lived. The Bible tells it simply, Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. One heartbeat on earth, the next in God's presence. No death, no suffering, no decay. A seamless transition from the temporal to the eternal. Enoch's walk with God had brought him to the ultimate destination, not by human effort, but by daily, consistent faithfulness. Why did God take Enoch in this unique way? Because he pleased him. Not through grand acts, not through heroic feats, not through recognition or fame. Enoch pleased God by walking faithfully, step by step, heart by heart. His devotion, sincerity, and consistency were more powerful than any display of human achievement. God honors faithfulness, and Enoch's life stands as a testament to that truth. Enoch's story challenges us today. It shows that greatness is not measured by spectacle or power, but by intimacy with God. It shows that a life pleasing to God is built on consistency, honesty, and devotion. It reminds us that ordinary steps, repeated faithfully, are noticed by the divine and can shape eternity. Walking with God begins with small, intentional choices, a quiet prayer, a moment of reflection, a step of obedience. These seemingly insignificant acts, repeated over time, cultivate a life anchored in God's presence. They transform the ordinary into the sacred, the fleeting into the eternal. And as we follow Enoch's example, we discover that our own ordinary lives can hold extraordinary value in the eyes of God. Even when the world ignores or rejects us, God walks with us. Even in struggle, uncertainty, or loneliness, He is near. And as we choose faithfulness, as Enoch did, we become vessels of His presence, witnesses of His love, and participants in His eternal plan. Enoch's life invites us to reflect. Are we walking with God daily, intentionally, and faithfully? Are we cultivating a relationship with Him in the ordinary moments of life? Are we trusting Him with our fears, our hopes, and our uncertainties? These are the questions that shape a life pleasing to God. Walking with God is not about perfection. It is about consistency. It is about returning to Him day after day, step after step. It is about allowing His presence to shape our hearts, guide our actions, and comfort our souls. Enoch's walk demonstrates that this is enough to please God, enough to gain His favor, enough to enter eternity directly into His embrace. The story of Enoch encourages us to embrace quiet faithfulness. It reminds us that ordinary choices, repeated consistently, are more significant than the world realizes. It reassures us that intimacy with God is available to anyone who seeks it with sincerity. And it shows that our lives, though brief in comparison to eternity, can be filled with eternal significance when we walk closely with our Creator. Enoch's life continues to speak across centuries, whispering truths we can apply today. Greatness in God's eyes is measured not by what we achieve publicly, but by what we cultivate privately. Consistency matters. Faithfulness matters. Love, devotion, and intimacy with God matter above all. And when our lives are lived in this rhythm, we, too, may step from earth into eternity, embraced by the one who has walked with us all along. Enoch's journey is an invitation for every heart to walk faithfully, to trust consistently, to love sincerely, to seek God daily, to cultivate intimacy with the Creator in ordinary life, to understand that the quiet steps of faith can lead to extraordinary closeness with God, and to remember that, just like Enoch, a life that pleases God does not go unnoticed, even if the world never sees it. May we, like Enoch, choose faithfulness in the ordinary, consistency in our devotion, and intimacy with God in every moment. Step by step, heart by heart, moment by moment. And through this faithful walk, may we discover the profound peace, purpose, and eternal connection that comes from walking closely with the one who loves us beyond measure. There are lives that pass quietly, yet leave an echo that resonates across time. Enoch's life is one of those echoes. He lived in a world full of chaos, ambition, and distraction, yet he remained firmly anchored to God. To most, he may have appeared ordinary, unremarkable, and unassuming. But what set him apart was not what he did publicly. It was the depth of his private walk with the Creator. His story is a testament to the power of faithful living, steady devotion, and the quiet courage to choose God in every moment. Enoch's world was one of distraction and drift. People were busy pursuing pleasure, accumulating wealth, building cities, and seeking recognition. Yet beneath this surface, hearts were empty, lives were shallow, and spiritual hunger was ignored. Most did not see God, nor did they care to. But Enoch saw differently. Even as the world around him slipped into decay, he sensed a deeper reality, a reality that could only be experienced by walking closely with God. That realization became the compass of his life. He did not begin with grandiose actions or public displays. Enoch's journey started quietly, in the ordinary moments of life. He noticed God in the sunrise, in the rhythm of his work, in the night sky filled with stars. He spoke to God as a friend speaks to a confidant, sharing his fears, questions, and aspirations. Over time, these small daily moments became a rhythm, a steady heartbeat of connection that grew into a life wholly devoted to God. Fatherhood deepened his understanding of life and God's purpose. When he held his son Methuselah, he saw the fragility and wonder of life in a way he had never felt before. The responsibility for this new life awakened a deeper sense of accountability and urgency in his own spiritual walk. It was no longer enough to walk faithfully for himself. He now sought to live in a way that would honor God and provide an example for future generations. His relationship with God became the foundation upon which he built his life and legacy. Enoch's closeness with God was visible, even without words. People noticed the serenity in him, the calmness that remained unaffected by the chaos around him, and the warmth in his presence that drew others near. Some were inspired, some were unsettled, but all could sense that he was different. Yet Enoch did not seek recognition or approval from anyone. His devotion was personal, private, and sincere. He walked with God not for accolades, but because he knew the value of intimacy with the Creator. Despite the world's corruption, he remained steadfast. Many ignored him, mocked him, or continued in the distractions of life. But Enoch continued his walk with God. He did not falter, nor did he give up when others rejected his message. He continued to pray, reflect, and listen. His life became a quiet witness to the extraordinary power of faithfulness, demonstrating that true devotion does not depend on the acknowledgement of others. Over centuries, Enoch's life followed this pattern. He walked, he prayed, he observed, he loved, he reflected. Each small act of faith, each moment of devotion, each choice to trust God, accumulated into a life wholly oriented toward eternity. For 300 years, he walked faithfully, establishing a rhythm of intimacy that would prepare him for the ultimate transition from the temporal to the eternal. Enoch's walk was not free from struggle. Doubts arose. Questions about life, purpose, and the world lingered. Yet he returned to God, seeking guidance, comfort, and clarity. Even the most faithful hearts experience uncertainty. The difference lies in how they respond. Enoch responded with trust and commitment, deepening his walk with God through each challenge, each question, each uncertainty. Imagine the depth of his intimacy with God. Each day began with conversation. Each task included reflection. Each night concluded with awe and gratitude. Through these simple yet consistent practices, he developed a closeness that transcended earthly understanding. His heart was tuned to eternity, his spirit anchored in the divine presence, and his life became a bridge between heaven and earth. Then came the day of ultimate transition. One ordinary day, Enoch walked as he had for centuries, perhaps in the fields or along a quiet path, breathing the fresh air and speaking to God as always. In a moment beyond comprehension, heaven opened, and God reached down to take him. Enoch did not struggle, falter, or fear. He simply stepped forward into the embrace of eternity. The biblical account is simple. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. One heartbeat on earth, the next in God's presence. No suffering, no death, no decay, only a seamless passage into eternal communion. Enoch's faithful walk had culminated in the extraordinary reward of intimacy with God. His life exemplified that steadfast devotion, even in a fallen world, is recognized and honored by the Creator. Why did God take Enoch in this manner? Because he pleased him. Not through human achievement, not through fame, not through spectacular acts, but through persistent faithfulness. Enoch's life demonstrates that God values sincerity, consistency, and a willing heart. Ordinary acts of obedience, repeated faithfully over time, are powerful in God's eyes. A life of quiet faithfulness can move heaven itself. Enoch's story challenges us to consider our own walk. Are we consistent in our faith? Are we seeking God in the ordinary moments of life, not just the extraordinary ones? Are we cultivating intimacy with Him in daily prayer, reflection, and obedience? Enoch's example shows that faithfulness matters more than brilliance, consistency more than flash, and intimacy more than recognition. Walking with God is a journey, not a single event. It begins with one step, one prayer, one moment of sincerity. Each choice to return to Him, to trust Him, and to seek His presence shapes our hearts and prepares us for eternity. Through these choices, the ordinary is transformed into the extraordinary, and the temporal is infused with eternal significance. Even when the world ignores or misunderstands us, God is faithful. He walks beside us, comforts us, guides us, and strengthens us. Enoch's life reminds us that this walk is available to anyone who chooses to take it, step by step, day by day, heart by heart. The ordinary rhythms of life become sacred when God is present. Enoch's legacy is a call to action. It reminds us that greatness is not defined by power, fame, or recognition. True greatness is found in faithfulness. True strength is found in intimacy with God. True courage is found in perseverance. True legacy is built through a life lived in consistent devotion. And Enoch's life is proof that such a life is noticed, honored, and ultimately rewarded by God Himself. As we reflect on his story, we see the invitation extended to all of us. Walk with God. Cultivate closeness, trust, and faithfulness. Live with awareness that each moment, each choice, each prayer matters. Even the smallest acts, repeated faithfully, accumulate into a life of eternal significance. And one day, like Enoch, we may step from earth into eternity, embraced by the Creator who has walked with us all along. Enoch's story is not just history. It is a guide, a mirror, and a whisper of hope. It reminds us that our ordinary steps of faith, no matter how quiet, are powerful. That God notices, that God honors, and that God rewards those who walk closely with Him. His life is an enduring lesson in devotion, intimacy, and the extraordinary power of simple, faithful living. May we follow Enoch's example, choosing God in the mundane, trusting Him in uncertainty, and walking faithfully through every season of life. Step by step, day by day, heart by heart, and through this faithful walk, may we discover the profound peace, purpose, and eternal joy that comes from walking closely with the one who loves us beyond measure. Some lives are loud, full of action, fame, and visible achievement. Others are quiet, steady, and almost unnoticed by the world around them. Enoch's life belongs to the latter category, yet it is among the most extraordinary. To those around him, he may have seemed like an ordinary man living in a world consumed by noise, ambition, and distraction. But what made him remarkable was invisible, the intimate walk he maintained with God. His story reminds us that true greatness is measured not by what the world sees, but by what God knows. Enoch lived in a time when humanity was drifting. People were busy chasing pleasures, building cities, multiplying wealth, and seeking recognition. Life seemed abundant, but hearts were empty and spirits were restless. In such a world, it was easy to forget the Creator, to ignore the eternal, to become blind to the divine. But Enoch was different. He noticed what others missed. He longed for God and sought Him in ways that would define his entire life. His journey began quietly. He did not start with grandiose acts or public displays of devotion. He began by noticing God in ordinary life, the morning sunlight, the rhythm of his work, the quiet night sky filled with stars. He spoke to God honestly, like a friend speaking to a confidant, sharing his fears, questions, and hopes. Each day, these moments of connection deepened, forming a consistent rhythm of faith and intimacy that would shape his character and life. Fatherhood became a profound catalyst in Enoch's spiritual walk. Holding his son Methuselah, he recognized the fragility and beauty of life. This new responsibility stirred a desire to live faithfully not only for himself, but for the next generation. The awareness that life is a gift to be stewarded and that God is the source of all guidance inspired Enoch to walk closely with the Creator every day. His relationship with God became the foundation for all his decisions, actions, and legacy. Enoch's devotion was visible even without words. Those around him noticed a calmness, a serenity, and a peace that could not be explained by circumstance. People felt drawn to him, inspired by his faith, and sometimes unsettled by the purity of his presence. He did not seek recognition or approval. His walk with God was personal and sincere. He was a living testimony of how ordinary life, lived in intimate connection with God, can radiate extraordinary influence. The world around Enoch continued its downward path. Many ignored his counsel, mocked him, or pursued their own desires. Yet he did not falter. He continued his walk, trusting God in every moment, praying faithfully, reflecting on his guidance, and serving others when opportunity arose. His life became a quiet, steadfast witness, showing that faithfulness and integrity in a fallen world can have an enduring impact. For 300 years, Enoch maintained this rhythm. He prayed, reflected, observed, and walked faithfully. Each choice to seek God, each small act of devotion, each honest conversation with the Creator accumulated into a life wholly oriented toward eternity. The ordinary details of life, work, family, and daily routines became infused with divine presence. His steps, though simple, were extraordinary in their consistency and intimacy with God. Enoch's journey was not without struggle. Doubts, fears, and questions about life and the world inevitably arose. Yet he responded by leaning into God, seeking guidance, and trusting in his presence. Even the most faithful heart experiences moments of uncertainty, but Enoch's response was consistent. He returned to God, reaffirmed his commitment, and deepened his walk with him. This persistence shaped a life that pleased God in profound ways. Imagine the depth of Enoch's intimacy with God. Each day, he began with conversation and reflection. Each task became an opportunity for prayer and connection. Each night, he gazed at the stars, feeling both awe and belonging. For centuries, he cultivated this closeness, aligning his heart with the eternal, anchoring his spirit in divine presence, and living a life that bridged heaven and earth. Then came the ultimate moment. Enoch, as he had done for centuries, walked with God. Perhaps he stepped into the fields, breathed the morning air, and whispered his familiar prayers. And in that quiet, extraordinary moment, heaven opened. God reached down, and Enoch stepped into eternity. He did not experience pain, fear, or struggle. One heartbeat on earth, the next in God's presence. The culmination of 300 years of faithful walking with God resulted in a seamless transition from the temporal to the eternal. The biblical account is simple. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. His life exemplifies the extraordinary power of consistent faithfulness. Enoch pleased God not through human achievement, not through spectacular feats, but through sincerity, devotion, and persistent intimacy. His story demonstrates that ordinary acts of obedience, repeated faithfully over time, are recognized by the divine and can shape eternity. Enoch's life challenges us today. It calls us to examine our walk with God. Are we faithful in the small, ordinary moments of life? Are we cultivating intimacy with Him in prayer, reflection, and action? Are we choosing consistency over convenience, devotion over distraction, and trust over fear? Enoch shows that this is the path to a life that pleases God, a life that carries eternal significance. Walking with God is a journey, not a single event. It begins with one step, one prayer, one choice of devotion. Each act of faithfulness, repeated over time, transforms ordinary life into something sacred. It aligns our hearts with eternity, infuses our days with purpose, and prepares us for the eternal embrace of God. Even when the world ignores or misunderstands us, God is faithful. He walks beside us, comforts us, guides us, and strengthens us. Enoch's story reminds us that this walk is available to all who are willing. Step by step, day by day, moment by moment, God meets us where we are and walks with us wherever we go. Enoch's legacy is a call to action and reflection. True greatness is not defined by public acclaim, wealth, or power. It is measured by faithfulness, intimacy with God, and devotion in ordinary life. Enoch's life is proof that a consistent, humble walk with God can be extraordinary and noticed by eternity itself. His story invites us to take a long view. It encourages us to embrace small, faithful steps, to nurture daily connection with God, to walk with integrity, and to trust in His guidance. Each choice, each prayer, each moment of obedience matters and contributes to a life of eternal value. Enoch's life is a reminder that intimacy with God transforms the ordinary into the extraordinary. It teaches that faithfulness, consistency, and sincere devotion are more powerful than spectacle or acclaim. And it shows that a life walking closely with God prepares the heart for the ultimate reward, eternal communion with the Creator. May we take this lesson to heart. Let us walk with God faithfully, consistently, and sincerely in our own lives. Let us choose devotion in the small moments, trust in His presence, and cultivate intimacy in our hearts. Step by step, day by day, heart by heart, and one day, like Enoch, we may step seamlessly from this life into eternity, embraced by the one who has walked with us all along.